in fantasy football. While he doesn't necessarily have some insane receiving upside like Christian McCaffrey, I highly doubt Dalvin Cook is going to get 100 plus targets this season like Christian McCaffrey easily will be able to. He makes up for it on the ground, and with the Minnesota Vikings offense being pretty run heavy, I believe that Dalvin Cook should be able to finish as the number 2 running back in fantasy football. At number 3, we have Alvin Kamara, running back of the New Orleans Saints. Now, with Jameis Winston taking over, I have complete and utter belief that Alvin Kamara could easily be the number 1 overall running back in fantasy football. While Jameis Winston isn't some notorious quarterback who just dumps the ball off left and right, in this offense, Alvin Kamara is probably the best weapon on this field, the best wide receiver on the field until Michael Thomas ends up returning. I believe Sean Payton is going to draw up all types of plays to get Alvin Kamara the ball, and in the offense, how it is now with Michael Thomas, I just see a potential for maybe like 8, 9, 10 targets every single game going his way, and that is very, very hard to find in fantasy drafts. At number 4, we have Derrick Henry, running back of the Tennessee Titans. Now, a big dispute in the top 5 rankings for fantasy football. Basically, everyone has McCaffrey, then Dalvin Cook. But after that, I have Alvin Kamara. Some people may have Derrick Henry ranked at that spot. Now, the reason why I have Derrick Henry ranked at number 4 and not 3 is because Derrick Henry just doesn't seem like the running back that's going to finish as the number 1.
We all know football season is the greatest time of year, but drafting season's a very close second. So whether you're drinking and drafting with your boys for your annual home league or preparing for your next high-stakes draft, the top priority remains the same: winning, and more specifically, winning money. And what better way to do that than by drafting a beauty? That's why you've got to check out our brand new draft kit at Awesemo.com, created by experts who have profited over $7 million playing fantasy sports. These guys are going to help you crush your drafts this year with tools like the Draft Wingman that's powered by projections from the number 1 ranked daily fantasy sports player in the world, Awesemo himself, and includes a one-of-a-kind recommendation engine that takes into account your prior picks to ensure a well-rounded team and optimal draft. Draft Wingman is also outfitted with best ball-specific recommendations, including our stack highlighting feature, which helps you complete your all-important best ball stack. If you're looking for more details, or maybe you're already down to join us for an incredible NFL season, click the following link and use the promo code WR, that's WR, to get the entire draft kit for only $9.95. We'll see you over there.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock, sponsored by Jock. I think did I hit my mark there? Who's really to say? Who knows? But if that was a kind of wonky intro, people who are watching on the internet right now, Chris's internet is screwed up. It's not my fault. It's not Terry's fault. It's totally the blame on Chris, the producer, because his internet doesn't work. We have to use StreamYard, and StreamYard, there's no kind of countdown we can do. It's just all something like, hey, the show is starting. So Lofty yells at us for a couple minutes, doing whatever it is that he's doing, selling everybody on fantasy football packages, and then just Terry and I show up on camera. So do you think that worked okay there, Terry?
To me, it felt like you nailed it. I mean, I think we got Chris on camera there for a couple seconds out to the world. Everybody got to see behind the scenes. But yeah, felt like you nailed the mark to me. I don't know. If anything, it was a production delay and on the anonymous production side of things.
Yeah, and we did see Larry C in the chat is already saying, "Who was that?" That is Chris. I'm sorry you guys had to see that, but listen, that's what happens sometimes on these things. And like I said, it's Chris's fault, his internet, so he gets shunned by having to appear on camera unknowingly. But that aside, we do have a baseball game baseball slate to talk about today. Also said today's sponsor is Jock Market. If you guys are new to Jock Market, head on over to the Apple Store, Google Play Store, all that. Download the app, make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. Get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Different way to play daily fantasy sports. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But first off, Terry, this slate, the first thing we have to talk about is the weather situation in Detroit, Cincinnati. That's how we're going to open the slate. How are you handling the weather there?
Yeah, so it was one I kept putting off throughout the day. I was telling you before we got on air, I was just making sure that I had it in my mind to check it, but I wanted to get closer to lock and then kind of slipped my mind. Been a weird day over at my house with a bunch of people traipsing through doing repairs and stuff, but I just pulled it up on Dark Sky a couple of minutes ago. To me, they've been the most reliable site around all year long for baseball information. They're not a baseball-specific site. They're just really good at getting these weather patterns right. They're showing light rain from 7 o'clock to 11, and then heavy rain till 1, and then light rain again. It's basically a 12-hour block of rain. This doesn't look good for baseball tonight. I hate the idea of taking Tyler Mahle out of the pitching pool. I hate the idea of losing the Reds' bats against Matt Boyd here. Don't really care too much about losing the Tigers in general, but the Reds side of this game, it sucks to lose, but I think it probably makes sense to at least have a plan, maybe run a second crunch so you can make a quick pivot that doesn't include this game. For right now, the crunch I've got, it's basically out to 300 lineups with this game included in it. I'm feeling a little bit worried about it because it's got like 25% Tyler Mahle shares. That would filter down probably a little further. I was planning on undercutting the field on him, but to lose him entirely just sucks. But I think that might be the plan as we get a little bit more toward lock. I think we're going to see a trend in that direction.
Yeah, so that's actually what I did. So Terry and I, we do our little pre-production powwow where we talk about, hey, let's see how we're going to make fun of Chris when the show starts and all that. That's where we figured out before the show starts. But on top of that, we were talking about what we're going to do. And I said that the crunch that I was currently running at the time, I did not have the Reds-Tigers game in, but what I'm doing is I'm running 2 separate crunches. So we're going to be doing the show, and it's probably going to be potentially hard to react to any news if we're going to be finding out if this game's delayed or postponed or whatever, 5 minutes before lock. So I have run one crunch that has that game in it and another one running right now without it. I'm going to upload the one without it for now, and I think that's how I'm going to go about playing it. But once again, we don't have all the information on the weather. It's going to be a fluid situation. In the Slack chat, we always have News God, El Negro Loco usually posting updates. We're always getting kind of weather updates in there. So I'm pulling that up right now just to make sure I have that on my phone as we go along. But it's a situation that's going to change throughout the slate, but it's definitely something that's going to be really important. But let's start by talking about Tyler Mahle, who at least as of now is projected to be massively owned. And, weather concerns aside, what do you make of Mahle? If let's just say we find out 30 minutes from now the slate is going to be playing, what are you going to be doing with them?
I mean, it's a top end pitching situation. It's a guy with a 28.1% strikeout rate, guy that we've kind of been riding all year long. I remember recommending him on his first start back at the beginning of the season, and we've been on him ever since. And he's in a great spot against the team with the second highest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching in all of baseball against these Detroit Tigers, 25.8. They're at a 90 WRC plus collectively, so they're 10% worse than average creating runs. They've got a little bit of ability to drive the ball, 3.35% home run rate, 157 ISO. Both of those put them like in the dead middle of the league. There's nothing special about this team, and they're bad at avoiding the strikeout. So a guy like Mahle, I expect, could come in here, have a great strikeout game, easily top this field in performance. There's a couple pitchers who are capable of matching him, but they're in worse spots. Out of the talented pitchers, he's by far in the best matchup. So it was a smash spot in everything other than the ownership. He's extremely popular. So like I was implying before, if the current projection I have is a 35% ownership on the FanDuel slate for 9,600, he's higher owned than that on DK at 10-2. I was planning on going under that 35% mark, but still having Tyler Mahle in like a quarter of my lineups, just shave 10% off to throw it around to some of these other guys, maybe juice Julio Urias a little bit and some of the other guys that I like. So I was going to undercut it anyway, but the idea of taking him off the board entirely, now all the ownership will flock to the same couple of pitchers, and then you've just got a really dead mid-range and bottom end of this field. So it's a tough call to take him out. If the game goes, I think I'm going to have him around 25%. Taking him out is just going to suck for the rest of the slate.
Yeah, and once again, it's something where with this weather situation, it's hard to know. I will say, though, that also I thought that Tyler Mahle was overowned before we started the show. I'm really curious to get updates to ownership projections as we go along here, just to see how people are going to react. And I'd be curious to also ask people in the YouTube chat, how are you guys handling the Tyler Mahle situation? Because, maybe that would give us a little bit of a read here. If everybody's saying, hey, I'm taking Mahle out of my player pool, maybe ultimately that'll reduce his ownership share, because I tend to think this 50% number that's over on DK and the 35.2% number on FanDuel, that has to come down as we get closer to lock, because it's a massive concern for me. It's a concern for you. I'm sure that's going to be a concern for other people as well. So I'm going to ask you another situation here. Let's say the game is 50-50 heading into lock to play or not, and Tyler Mahle ends up being like 10% owned. If we get a situation where the game is iffy, but he ends up being lower owned because of the weather, how would you be handling that?
That's a situation. I mean, if we could put precise enough numbers on it like that, that's a situation where I would immediately turn on my heel and go the opposite direction, let the field walk that way away from him, and I would start loading up on Tyler Mahle shares going back in the other direction because everybody would be exiting, and that would create an opportunity. It would create a little bubble around him where there's enough upside in getting to him that if the game plays and he has a good start, you're going to be so alone on that island that it's going to be profitable to do that, and it doesn't have to work out well for you all that many times in the year as long as you're doing that fairly consistently when that type of a situation around that type of a play arises. It's a pretty unique situation. It also looks to me, I think if I had to put a number on it, I'd be over 50% that this one's just going to get washed just based on what that radar and that weather forecasts look like. So unless we had some kind of clearing skies report where it was, hey, this suddenly change direction and it's going to be a sunny day and we're good here, that would not obviously create the people flocking away unless it happened in the last few minutes. But in that kind of a situation where, sudden change and everybody's still going away from them, absolutely, it's a situation where I want to jump back on and overload on them if I can.
Yeah, and by the way, just based on, and this is a small sample size, I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all. However, I'm looking at some of the responses that we're getting here in chat, and it does seem like the majority of people are taking Tyler Mahle out of the player pool. And by the way, we've got some people in the chat like, hey, Dakota Simpkins saying this game isn't playing. I don't know that for sure. I think it's very much up in the air. But we've also got, so it's funny, we've got Dakota Simpkins in here saying the game definitely isn't playing. This is useless to talk about. Whereas we also had somebody, Josh Granger, earlier in the chat said that the game should play based on what he's looking on the weather report. It's up in the air. It's iffy. I don't know what it's going to play or not. I think to say definitively, what's going to be the outcome. We don't. There's an hour before lock. The weather is always a little fickle. So we're still going to need more updates, but we'll see what happens as it goes on.
Yeah, neither of us are even like pretend like Twitter baseball weathermen or anything like that. Like we're just following the information that we've got, looking at the radar here and speculating on this. But the idea that it's not an important spot, like this is one of the critical inflection points of the entire slate, whether or not this game even happens, because you're taking one of the top pitchers, probably the pitcher in the best situation with the most talent and the most strikeout upside, off the board completely if this game doesn't play. And there is no definitive answer as to whether this is going or not. So this made the most sense to spend this much time talking about. Everything else on this slate is probably less important.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing too is we're going to get more updates. We've got an hour here, so there's no need. There's no hurry. There's no hurry to give out everybody that we're going to be rostering. The other thing too is if we actually did, we could do this show in 5 minutes if we wanted to, but we got to get paid. Right, guys, we work by the hour. If Terry and I just show up, we do a 5-minute show and just be like, yeah, pitcher 1, pitcher 2, pitcher 3, stack 1, stack 2, stack 3. Then we're out of a gig. So you guys gotta humor us a little bit here. But that aside, we've gone past the Tyler Mahle thing. Any weather updates we'll get to. We'll hit them as the show goes on. But the other pitcher we need to talk about here, my least favorite player in all of MLB DFS right now, and probably the same for a lot of other people too, Joe Musgrove, who has just been wildly inconsistent this year and is very, very popular today. I'm a little bit underweight to the field on Joe Musgrove right now. I'm going to be stacking against him. That's just however I kind of approach these Joe Musgrove chalk situations. He's been a pitcher this year who is so hard to predict. He's gone off in tough matchups. He's gotten bombed. Like a couple starts ago, pitches against Arizona Diamondbacks, scores 0 fantasy points, and he's like 50% owned. Joe Musgrove, for sure, points per dollar basis. I think that he's a fine option. He projects really well. But I'm not comfortable with the 41% ownership he has on DK. I'm not comfortable with the 20% ownership on FanDuel. I'm going to be coming in underweight to the field on Musgrove, but how are you handling him?
Yeah, I was aiming for trying to get around the field, probably undercutting. Most of those situations where I would be around the field, I choose to just shave off a little bit and get under. And in a situation like this, Joe Musgrove's another one of these guys. He's been one of my guys all season long. For better or worse, I've been going to him. I've mentioned several times I traded for him in our dynasty season long, first place still. And he's worked out fairly well on the whole. In those several starts where he went totally wonky in July, yeah, it was a little bit rough there. But I do still trust the guy. For me, though, it's about the matchup. The Astros are the best lineup in baseball against both hands. They strike out the least, and they create their most runs by WRC plus against both righties and lefties this season. It's a difficult situation. He's not severely discounted. Like 8,900 is a pretty good price for him on DK, but that's why he's getting all that ownership. 92 is probably about right for this matchup for Joe Musgrove on FanDuel. So that's just kind of leading me into a situation where, like I said, I'll probably be around the field. If the field's at 20 and I'm at 15, 12, somewhere around there, I'd be comfortable with that on most slates. I just don't know where those other ownership shares would go for me because I don't want any of Kwang Young Kim, Adrian Hauser. There's like 6 pitchers on this slate that I just don't want any of. So it's just a question of where I would put these shares if it wasn't Joe Musgrove. So on a lot of these questions, especially if we lose Molly, I might end up just riding with the field or even juicing up over the field on some of the guys that I just have some trust in because I don't want to go to those lesser options on this slate all that much. So it's a weird situation around these guys, and it swings on that Molly question.
Yeah, so then, I mean, here's one guy in the upper pricing tier that I definitely do like right now, and that's Julio Urias, who I don't like the matchup against the Giants. However, we look at kind of the range of outcomes here where, let's use the DraftKings top pitchers tool for reference. We have Joe Musgrove with a 24.2% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. We have Julio Urias with a 23.4% chance. However, we have Joe Musgrove nearly double the ownership despite a similar range of outcomes. So I just look at that kind of data and I say that, hey, Julio Urias, I don't love the matchup against the Giants, but I don't love the security and the inconsistency of Joe Musgrove. So I'm going to go with Julio Urias in more shares of GPP lines for me just for that reason. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I have them projected within a couple points of one another on my FanDuel board. It looks like a at least highly playable spot for Urias. I mean, the Giants are good. They've been very, very good all season long. And that holds up against both hands. Only a 21.4% strikeout rate against lefties for the team, for the active roster. The best home run rate against second best against either hand. 4.77% home run rate against lefties. Only second to the Red Sox against righties at 4.84%. They create runs 9% better than average. So this is a very good baseball team. But Urias is having a very good season. And with nobody on him, 6.5% ownership on FanDuel, 25% on DK. Highly playable just for the situation. 150 and 2/3 innings, 26.5% strikeout rate is one of the better marks on the board. 5.3% walk rate. He's good at keeping guys off base, good at limiting quality contact. 6.1% barrel rate, 30% hard hit. There's not a lot of hard contact going back against him. So yeah, he's going up against a tough lineup, but on a slate that's just lacking in quality options, he's a really, really high-end guy who nobody seems to be going to in all that much of a quantity. So I expect his ownership will rise a lot as people flock away from Molly. That's the one thing. Like our 6.5 will probably be over 10, over 12, somewhere around there for FanDuel. He'll probably get up over 30 on the DK slate. So the advantage there might get erased a little bit. But I do still really like the spot by comparison to some guys that I just don't believe in their talent. So I think he's a very good option today.
Yeah, and I think somebody who kind of is in a similar vein is we have Framber Valdez, who also rates out as a positively leveraged pitcher right now. We only have him with 10% ownership right now on DK projected, over on FanDuel projected for just 3. I'm just kind of having a hard time getting to him just based on some of our lower projections for him. And then also that in the same price range, I do still prefer Urias a decent amount as a contrarian option. One thing that stands out to me about Valdez, just in terms of his upside at this kind of price point, number one, it's the matchup. And then number 2, just the low strikeout rate. So getting overweight to the field on him in tournaments, that's all well and good. But if you're somebody who only plays 1 lineup, 3 lineup, something like that, I'd rather go to Urias as my contrarian option than Framber Valdez.
So I love the ownership mark on Urias, but I think I'm maybe a little bit more excited about the Framber Valdez mark because I think he's a little bit less popular. Like I think people will go more to Urias than they'll go to Framber Valdez here. And partly with good reason, right? He's at a 22.4% strikeout rate over the 105 innings on the season. I mentioned Urias was up at an inflated rate. So he's a much better strikeout option for Urias, despite going up against, similar quality in terms of limiting the strikeouts in these lineups. The Padres are at a 22% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching on the season. So they're very good at avoiding the strikeouts also. And Valdez hasn't struck anybody out this season. It's come down. He was at a 26.4% rate in 2020. He was in AAA, he was at a 38% rate for a while, 22.1 in 2018 in the majors. So he's always around this level. We've seen a little bit higher acumen, but this is kind of who he is. He's a contact guy. He's a ground ball guy. What I do like about him here, though, is that negative 5.8 degree average launch angle for the entire season just keeps the ball on the ground like crazy. 69.8% ground ball percentage for the entire year. And the Padres, for all their quality, against left-handed pitching, the active roster 1% below average creating runs, 154 team ISO, and a 2.94% home run rate. So they're well below average in some of the power categories, and they're 1% below average in run creation. I think Valdez gives you a clean start here. I think he's got 7 clean innings in him, gives up maybe a couple of runs, makes up for him with a couple of strikeouts. And it's just the comparison I made when I wrote about him today was kind of like what Adam Wainwright gave us yesterday. He gave us just a deep start. Wainwright was going into yesterday like 4th in the league in innings pitched on the season, tied for 4th in quality starts. I think we get that kind of a start here where you just go 6 or 7 innings, gets you to that quality start bonus, gives you the potential for a win bonus here if the Astros are ahead of the Padres. It's an important series. It's a big series. It's an interesting series for both teams. So I'm excited to watch this game, and I think Valdez is interesting.
Yeah, and I'll ask you then, do you prefer him more as a FanDuel play than a DraftKings play, or is it still both sites that you like him on?
I think I would play him on both because his single-digit ownership on DK is appealing, right? And when you have to roster 2 pitchers and you see a guy under 10%, that's like somebody at his talent level, you've got to pay up for him. That's the only thing. He's at 10,000. He's the second most expensive pitcher behind Molly. So if we lose Molly, he's the most expensive pitcher. You're paying $300 more for him than Urias. You're paying $1,100 more for him than Musgrove. But with nobody on him, I think it's worth that extra money to just push that much of the field away and take advantage of what could be just on general quality without a ton of upside or a ton of strikeouts, just a good quality start where he gives you a nice score.
Yeah, I still view him as more of a high floor than a high ceiling guy. But, with that said, a lot of this is also going to come down to ultimately what we're going to want to do with Tyler Mahle. And by the way, I will point out that our let's call him resident weatherman, but really just all-encompassing news god, the news god El Negro Loco. He is fairly confident, at least as of right now, that the game is going to play. And if we get any other updates from him, that will bear mentioning. But at least as of now, he says he does expect that game to play, unlike that guy in the YouTube chat who was totally convinced that game had 0% chance of playing. And we're wasting our time by even bringing up Tyler Mahle as an option. But as of right now, at least per the news god, he's the god of news. He surely controls the weather also. He's saying that he thinks that game should be playing. But any other guys in the upper end of the pricing range do you want to talk about?
Let's just take a quick look here. I mean, how does Marco grade out for you in terms of DraftKings? It's a pretty different price. He's $900 more expensive on DK than he is on FanDuel. I think in that matchup, I can get to him a little bit on the FanDuel slate, but at 93, like he just mixes in with those top end guys. I don't know that I need to get there on the DK slate. Are you seeing that similarly with Marco?
Earlier in the day when he wasn't picking much ownership, he was somebody who I thought I could be getting to. But in the last run I did, and I'm just going to do one more update here, I didn't have him in any lineups. And let's see. Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, he's popping up right now in 2% of lineups. Nothing significant for the large part, unless you're playing a bunch of lineups. I think comfortable fading him. I just don't know that there's a whole lot of upside in that kind of price tag that he has.
Yeah, and on the FanDuel side where he's a lot cheaper, like I said, he came up only in 5% of these lineups in the crunch. So it's not like he's a big part of my life over here. That would probably lead to, a handful of shares, if that, as he goes through the filtering process. And the thing that's interesting, everybody, I'm sure is just out in the public, just kind of looking at the matchup and saying, Diamondbacks suck, fire away with Marco. But if you look under the covers, 21.7% strikeout rate for the Diamondbacks against lefties this season. Great runs, 5% better than average for the active roster. 170 team ISO is right around average for the active roster. So they're not terrible in the split. They're really bad against right-handed pitching. But against lefties, there's a little bit of sneakiness to the Diamondbacks. So I'm not necessarily saying, hey, go run out there and play a bunch of lineups filled with Diamondbacks because they're, despite those numbers, they're not a very good baseball team, but it could put a little bit more of a ding in Marco here. So I don't think he has the upside that maybe the public sees there.
I mean, he's pitched much better over the last month. His numbers, it's kind of a tale of two seasons, right? If you look at Marco Gonzalez's numbers on the whole, they're miserable. But he has pitched better over the last month. Personally, I said I'm not going to be getting to him tonight, but I'll ask you, is there anything you've seen from him out of the last month that you can look to and see if there's any kind of tangible changes that make you think what he's done is sustainable?
I did not look that deeply into him, and I haven't recently to see what he's doing with his pitch mix. So I'm going to punt on that question. Did you pick up on anything? Were you asking that because you're aware of something? Because I just haven't studied into him enough in recent weeks to say.
No, I was just making conversation. I'm really not sure. He's still somebody who I think he's somewhere in between, right? I don't think he's as bad as he was at the start of the season. I don't think he's nearly as good as he was over the last month of the season either. So I think he's probably somewhere in between, which still, if you look at him over the course of his career, it's a fairly low upside guy. And, it's still who we're looking at in that kind of price range. he's 12.6%, and I'm going to refresh the ownership we have right now just to make sure it's updated. But 12.6% on DK. If I'm going to a contrarian pitcher in this upper price range, I'd rather go to Framber Valdez for less ownership. I'd rather go to Julio Urias, and that's even with the with the point being that I'm not super high on Framber Valdez for the slate either. But Julio Urias is somebody who I would want to be getting to here. By the way, massive ownership update. This is going to change a lot.
Oh, good.
Julio. So the ownership on Tyler Mahle, I assume because of weather concerns, has come down fairly significantly. Still going to be very popular, but 38% on DK, over on FanDuel now 24%. So pretty close to Joe Musgrove now in terms of who the most popular pitcher on the slate is. They're kind of 1A and 1B in terms of chalk. With that information now on Tyler Mahle, how is this impacting your outlook on him?
So I'm still going to play it closer to the line. I'm about to run the second crunch, taking that game out. The first one had it in. I'm kind of hoping I get to use the first one here. If he's coming down in ownership, like we talked about earlier, and we get good indicators on the game probably being able to play, and we'll hope those keep coming in from the news god, then that becomes more appealing. Anytime we can get to that situation, and keep in mind, we only need it to go like 6 innings in that situation and get a clean, upside start out of him. He could rack up a bunch of strikeouts, get out of there with a win, even if it's a shortened game. I think it would maybe still make me not necessarily want to go to the offenses. And then you do have the question mark of if there's an in-game delay and they come off the mound, that becomes really concerning. But if the field is getting away from them, it makes it more appealing unless we get specific news about this is not likely to play.
Yeah, and like I said, as of now, our resident weatherman, the news got on Negro Loco, he is anticipating this game is more likely to play than not. You want to talk about some of the bad pitchers that I like today? I'm gonna lead you on it. Should we get into this? Should we get into the thing that everybody's gonna be able to make fun of me on Twitter after it goes poorly?
Please, I think that's what everybody's probably waiting for out there. Let's do it.
So I'll let you guess. I think you know me, fairly well from the shows we've done today over the course of the year. Who do you think is my favorite pitching option on the slate?
Oh boy, $6,500 Jose Suarez.
Oh, no, it's $8,100 Herman Marquez on DK. So
right.
Herman Marquez right now is picking up almost no ownership. We've got Marquez right now projected for 1% ownership on FanDuel. Over on DK is projected for 2.8% ownership. The matchup is far from ideal against the Braves. Also, the park is negative ideal. This is the least ideal thing we could possibly get pitching in Coors Field. But we still have Herman Marquez in our data. He is 12.8% likely to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate compared to just that 2.8% ownership. And I just look at that as being one pitcher who, kind of in the mid-tier price range is going massively under-owned. We have the Braves in terms of a stack as being an over-owned offense. So I like the leverage I'm getting on Marquez, both against the Braves and him being under-owned. In general, these pitchers, I have all kinds of question marks. Mahle, we have weather concerns and he's inconsistent. Joe Musgrove, all kinds of inconsistent, and he's facing Houston. Julio Urias is facing San Francisco. I don't feel great about any of these guys, but Marquez is just somebody who I generally like as a pitcher, and he's picking up no ownership. So is he somebody you're getting to?
Yeah, I'm always willing. He's like the example that I use when I talk about the kind of pitcher who I'm willing to roster at Coors Field. I usually wind that around to, or just Herman Marquez, because he knows how to pitch in this ballpark. For better or worse, that's a clunky way to put it, but he's got a demonstrable track record of being able to pitch at home at Coors. It's just in his numbers. And he's a good pitcher overall for the season. He'd be a guy that I think a lot of people would think more of if he didn't pitch some of his game in Coors, because he does take the occasional ding there. He's not invincible there, but he is a guy who has been effective in this home ballpark, this ridiculous elevated ballpark. And yeah, when you can get him at that kind of ownership, that's the type of situation to exploit for sure. And I just saw where Jose Suarez, the cheaper guy that I mentioned before, is coming up in our leverage tool. And looking at that, it makes total sense that this was your choice. I didn't realize he was so under-owned on the slate. I figured that the crowd would be a little bit more on top of it. But yeah, overall, he's a very good pitcher, 24.3% strikeout rate on the season, 3.53 xFIP, induces a 12.6% swinging strike rate. So he gets out of the trouble that he creates pretty reliably with his 8.4% walk rate. He's only got a 4.9% barrel ball rate. Reasonable hard hit rate at 37.3%. So he's not bad in terms of contact, not bad in terms of having too many guys on base, which are the things that really kill you at Coors Field. Coors Field isn't so much as it's dangerous for guys who give up home runs, but it's very, very dangerous for guys who give up too many base runners, too many run creation opportunities. And Marquez is good at limiting those. So I think that makes a lot of sense. The price is right and the ownership is spectacular. The one bad thing is the matchup on the other side. The Braves are a murderer's row of a lineup. Very, very good team. I'm just switching over to the team stats board here. 194 collective ISO against right-handed pitching and a 4.66% home run rate. So two of the higher offensive numbers for power. But similar to where the Padres were, they're 1% below average creating runs by collective WRC plus and 24.2% strikeout rate against righties. So there's some strikeouts on the board for Marquez here. It could be one of those sneaky major upside slate winning kind of a situation because nobody's going there right now.
And the Braves are the most popular stack on the slate as of now. And what other thing, if we're just going to add in, and this is just confirmation bias at this point, I'm pulling up data to just lead more people in the direction, making more points for German Marquez here. One of the top bets in our player prop tool, which is free to use over at Awesemo.com. German Marquez over 5.5 strikeouts. That is plus 116. And that is a 26% expected ROI. That is one of our top prop bets of the day in our projections. How do you feel about that bet over 5.5 strikeouts for Marquez?
It sounds probably right around where I've got him. Let me pull it up here. His projected strikeouts in my model, his implied is 5.10, and then he gets the little kick from my model, and it's a 5.67. So I've got him. It's a great line. I've got him going over it.
Also, keep in mind, it is plus 116 on the over. So all that in mind, I'll say you probably have it pretty close to what our projections on the site have. So if you're playing one side of it, I would lean towards the over. And then, like I said, also, I'm already leaning towards playing Marquez here. He's my favorite GPP play on the slate. My confidence in it, very, very low. But it's the type of play that over the course of the season, I think this is the proper ownership and the leverage to get on him. And now I'm going to ask you, with the idea being that Marquez is my favorite pitcher on the slate for tournament purposes, who do you think my second favorite pitcher is, keeping in mind that it's in the same vein?
Is it in the same vein and in the same ballpark? Is that what we're talking about? Just going to the other side of this one? Ian Anderson against the awful Colorado lineup? Yeah, I think that makes some sense at 7,000 on the DK slate for sure. Would you do that on FanDuel, though? Would you do either of these pitchers on FanDuel? Let me ask it that way. Absolutely.
At these kind of ownerships, because, FanDuel, obviously it's a single pitcher site, so we don't get quite as much exposure to pitchers, half as much just based by the math. But still, we're looking at him over on FanDuel, where we've got German Marquez 1.5% projected ownership on FanDuel. Ian Anderson only project for 1% ownership at 7,300. Based on our data, those are just not correct ownerships. And these are two pitchers that I like. And Ian Anderson, 5% chance of being the top scoring pitcher of the day over on FanDuel. German Marquez, 7%. So these are guys we're looking at 5 to 7x their chance of being a top scoring pitcher relative to their ownership. I think those are very strong GPP plays. The chance of it hitting is fairly low. But on the days it hits, I expect it to pay out a fairly substantial margin. That's why German Marquez, Ian Anderson, these are two pitchers that I'm going to be on. And then so be it. If Coursefield goes out and scores 1 million runs, I'm probably dead tonight.
Yeah, and look, that's what we're doing when we roster pitchers at Coors. We kind of go into that situation knowing that we're getting the low ownership and getting the pricing that we're getting because of the bad ballpark situation. And the bet that you're making is that, hey, these guys are talented enough to overcome that. And I agree on Anderson. I think he's a very talented young pitcher. On the season, 23.1% strikeout rate, 3.82 xFIP, 11.7% induced swinging strike rate. Also pretty decent at limiting the launch angle, the trajectory for home runs. A little bit too much hard contact and barrels, but he's talented enough to overcome it. I expect he went, I think, 5 2/3 his first start back from the injury. So I expect we're getting a full start from him unless he gets dinged up here too, right?
Yeah, I don't have any real significant concerns. Like you said, 5 2/3 last time out. So no reason to think we don't get 6 or 7 innings this time. One thing that is a little bit of a concern, he didn't strike out any hitters last time out, which that's a little bit of a red flag. But once again, this Colorado Rockies offense is not good. They just happen to play in a ridiculously hitting-friendly ballpark. But, there are plenty of times we see the Rockies against right-handed pitching at home that they just kind of stink the bed. And Ian Anderson is a pitcher who could certainly present those kind of issues. So there's a lot of chalk on the slate, and I don't think any of it's unreasonable. If anybody says they're playing Tyler Mahle, they're playing Joe Musgrove, I have them in my player pool too, but the guys I'm most overweight to relative to the current ownership we have projected, it is German Marquez and Ian Anderson at pitcher. Anybody else in the low end of the pricing range that's really sticking out to you?
I don't really want to get to any shares of most of these guys. I think Ronaldo Lopez has the talent assuming that what we've seen this year is real and that he's actually at 27 years old, finally made the leap. I think he's got the underlying talent to get through that Kansas City lineup. But I actually wrote up the Kansas City stack because I don't believe that what we're seeing this year is totally real. So I don't think I would go that direction. At 6,300 on the DK slate, though, that does become interesting just on talent, just on spec. He's got the ability to strike out a good handful of those hitters. I mentioned Jose Suarez before just because he's going up against that awful Texas lineup, and he's another guy at 6,500. So low end of the pool type options, but nobody else really that I'm at all interested in. Like, I don't want any part of Matt Boyd going up against the Reds if that game plays. Plus, you get the rain situation there. I don't think Adrian Hauser is particularly good, and I believe in that Cardinals offense going up against him. So, and same thing with Kwang Young Kim pitching for the Cardinals going up against the Brewers on the other side. I just don't think I need shares of those guys. Are you getting to any of those lesser type guys?
Not in a significant way. Over the course of 150 lineups, some of these guys will pop up, 2-3 lineups here and there, but not significantly. It's really, I'm playing a lot of the chalk at pitcher, but not quite as much as the field. And then the other guys I'm getting to as of now, like I said, my real big stands at pitcher are going to be German Marquez and Ian Anderson. I know that we've got some people in the chat bringing up Daniel Lynch, who early in the day I thought I could have had some interest when I was doing the strategy show with Adam, but ultimately, I'm just not really finding myself getting to him. It's somebody who, once again, if he's in a couple of lineups, no real issue, but I'm struggling to make a real hard investment in Daniel Lynch, just given that his overall numbers in the big leagues this year have not been great. And the matchup against the White Sox is far from ideal.
Yeah, that's one that I have to say I didn't really think would even get mentioned on the show. Daniel Lynch, 18-something% strikeout rate, 18.4% strikeout rate over 48 and a third, 10.1% walk rate, 4.88 xFIP, allows a 43.5% hard hit rate with a 9.7% barrel rate, going up against a White Sox club that is fantastic against left-handed pitching, 4.59% home run rate, 191 collective ISO, 11% better than average creating runs. All they strike out a little bit more than average, 24.3%, but they murder the ball against left-handed pitching. I don't want any part of Daniel Lynch here.
Yeah, and once again, like early in the day, I was kind of trying to weigh some of these contrarian options. Ultimately, if I'm playing options that are very risky, I'm at least taking the better pitchers in German Marquez and Ian Anderson. Beyond that, I can see the reasoning for it. I'm just not getting to him. Currently in my build, I have him in 1% of lineups, and there's a chance that ends up going down by the time that the slate actually locks. So it's somebody who I need to see a little bit more success from him before I really make any kind of investment in him here. But to me, that kind of wraps up the pitchers. Anybody else you want to bring up here at all?
No, I think that's got most of them pretty covered. I don't see anybody here that we missed.
So while you're doing that, I'm going to bring up one more time. Today's sponsor is Jock Market. If you guys are new to Jock Market, this is a different way to play daily fantasy sports. There is no pricing. There is no lineup construction. It's a Jock Market for athletes. So there's going to be an IPO period. You bid on the players, but the slate doesn't end just because the slate starts. There's still tinkering to be done after the games are underway. There's a player that's playing poorly. You think that could pick it up in the second half of the game. You could buy low on players. You could sell high. All that over at Jock Market. It's a really fun way, different way to play daily fantasy sports. If you want to play on Jock Market, download the app, use the promo code Awesemo, and get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Anything you saw that you want to bring up in the pictures? If not, we'll move over to stacks.
Yeah, let's jump over to stacks. Time to talk hitting.
All right, so let's get into the hitting. And I have to be honest, in terms of hitting, I don't see a whole lot I love, at least relative to where the field's at on these offenses. I find a lot of them to be fairly appropriately owned. I don't think there's a lot of chalk that looks egregiously bad. There's certain teams, like on DK, I think the Coors Field offenses are a little bit overowned, but nothing egregious. And I'm going to be really making my differentiations in lineups with my pitching as opposed to with my offenses. But I'll ask you, is there any one offense that stands out to you above all the others?
I think the most interesting spot on the entire board, probably, at least based on what I'm looking at, is the Dodgers on FanDuel, coming up with a pretty nice positive leverage mark, one of the higher ranked teams that we've got on the board, and the highest ranked overall team in terms of leverage and probability of success, going up against Jay Jackson and what I assume is mostly a bullpen game for the Giants here. I like the upside for what is essentially an all-star team for the Dodgers. No Cody Bellinger in that lineup, despite starting with a righty. I assume they're just worried about matchups. He's basically a platoon player at this point, former MVP 2 years ago, which is insane. But this is just a lineup that you can play top to bottom. And they're getting some attention on the DK slate. They're playable over there. A lot of the guys in the single digits and a lot of the key hitters in single digits. On FanDuel, everybody is under 10%, and they're fairly priced. There's only 3 guys over 4,000 in this lineup. There's no real reason to not go to this team in this spot. So I think the Dodgers on FanDuel, very, very interesting situation based on the leverage. In terms of the probability of success, yeah, you can always go to the Coors game. I think the Reds are pretty interesting in terms of that, but they're getting a little over-owned on both sites. The White Sox, like I just mentioned, up against Lynch, I expect to have a pretty good game. They're drawing a little bit of ownership. This is how I go down the board and end up writing about the Kansas City Royals, who rank 3rd from the bottom of the board. Just looking for interesting leverage type situations.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about the Royals, because actually earlier in the day, I did think the Royals, at least for, some stolen base equity, were an upside play. Here's something that's concerning me about them a little bit. Number one, Ronaldo Lopez has been much improved this year, and we haven't seen him really stretched out as a starting pitcher, but on the whole, he's been better this year. The other thing also, no Adalberto Mondesi in the lineup, and he's somebody who I always look at as kind of a staple for those Royals stacks, and considering that he's not in there today, and he was only recently back from injury, but he was one of my favorite one-off plays to have in the lineup, or a favorite one-off play, and somebody who I really liked in terms of stacks. But not having him in there, I really think hurts the upside. So the Royals, to me, they're fine to get to. They're low owned, but it's not like a staple of my lineups or anything.
Yeah, and that's probably how they're going to end up shaking out for me. Like I said, I was looking for teams that I believed in the spot and had some tangible upside to write about when I was writing about that spot on a day where a lot of the teams that looked maybe a little bit more appealing were getting over-owned. It's difficult to write about on a day like today and pick one of these teams out of a hat. But I do still believe that there's enough upside here that they're at least worth talking about, because for all his success this year, yeah, Ronaldo's been much improved. 35 innings, 4 starts, 29.8% strikeout rate, a 5.6% walk, 3.47 xFIP, a phenomenal 0.69 whip so far. That has been a gigantic leap up in quality for what we've seen from Ronaldo in his major league career so far. 525 and 2/3 innings, counting those numbers from this year. He's at a career 5.16 xFIP, a 20% strikeout rate, an 8.8% walk rate, and a 1.42 home run per 9. So he gives up the home run in historic sense. This season, he's been much, much better limiting quality contact, 7.5% barrels, 31.3% hard hit. Still gives up a nice launch angle. It's a fly ball pitcher, but he's kept the ball in the yard a lot better this season. So he's really improved. It's a 0.77 home run per 9 this season. It basically cuts his career home run mark in half. I don't know that I believe that he's actually made the leap. He was a major, major prospect coming up. He's 27 now. He's struggled to find it. Post-hype guys do happen from time to time. 27 is not ancient for a pitcher to arrive finally and really put things together. But I'd be surprised if it's totally true. So I think there's enough upside here in this Royals team, just based on, like you said, they've got a lot of stolen base upside between Whit Merrifield, Nicky Lopez, guys who know how to get on base, have fairly reliable hit tools, hitting in front of a few hitters that I believe in terms of either power or their run creation acumen in Sal Perez, Andrew Benintendi, Carlos Santana. If you want to mix in a Michael Taylor, who has had his usual weird little productive kind of a year for no attention and no money, but a handful of stolen bases, handful of home runs, infrequent pop, you can mix him in. You can get to Ryan O'Hearn. He's had a bumpy season so far in 219 plate appearances in terms of his on base at 260, his batting average at 228. But he's hit 9 home runs in that sample, 44.5% hard hit with a 9.6% barrel rate. And a lot of these guys are very good at putting the ball in play. O'Hearn was not the right example to say that on, but the top end of the lineup, 13.7%, 13.6% strikeout rates for Merrifield and Lopez. Sal is bumpy at 26%, but then you get into Benny at 19 and change, Carlos Santana at 15 and change. Santana also walks a ton at 13%. So these guys are going to be on base. And against the pitcher, again, who's demonstrated a shaky history with the walks, with giving up hard contact and all the things we look for, I think it's maybe a sneaky little spot. So I'm going to have some Royals. I'll be over the field, but it'll probably be tempered maybe a little bit more than I expected earlier in the day.
Yeah, and I think is Adalberto Mondesi being out of the lineup like the main driving force for you lowering them?
Major ding to that lineup and to just the overall, the projected average, the average projection that I've got. He had a very nice home run mark. It's an excellent all-star caliber player to be taking out of this team. Another guy who runs like crazy. His ISO is, I think, was in the 400s so far because he only made like 40 some odd plate appearances, but he's hit five home runs, stolen a handful of bases already. Extremely productive player. So it does suck to lose him, but based on the guys that are in here, I think you can still string together a lineup. And I think think that would push any idea of public ownership that we had on this team would probably mostly exit out the door with him leaving this lineup too. So, for that reason, I think you can stick here and maybe pick up a little bit of additional sneaky upside.
All right, I want to circle back on, there was a pitcher question in our premium Slack chat that I missed earlier, then we'll jump back into offenses. But Jets World in our Slack chat said that he's playing in the 888 on DK. He tentatively has Joe Musgrove and Marco Gonzalez as his pitchers. He says he likes to play safe with his pitchers, but he likes to play safe. But he got Joe Musgrove in there. I don't know if that's the safest option in the world. Should I stay pat, or do you suggest a better option? For me, I could say my two favorite pitching options on the slate as of right now are Julio Urias and German Marquez. I overall, also relative to ownership, I like Ian Anderson a lot, but at least in terms of the guys that I'm getting to the most right now, it's Urias and Marquez. But if you're playing a single entry lineup, I just don't think there's enough upside to play Marco Gonzalez in the 888 on DK.
I agree with that, and the fact that you can get your combination of Urias and Marquez a little bit cheaper. They're 17.8 combined, and it was over 18,000 for Musgrove and Marco there. I think that's the way to go. You're getting probably two more reliable spots. I just, for all the quality I think Musgrove has, for all the trust I have in him, I just don't love throwing him up against the lineup that's just going to put the ball in play. There's just not that many strikeouts available for him in Houston. He could rack some up against them. He is talented enough to do it. But why walk your one lineup in that major tournament into that kind of a situation? Marco, we talked through, and we don't love the situation there. Some underlying numbers indicate maybe a little bit more quality than we think around Arizona. And you're not getting a discount, $9,300 for Marco Gonzalez when Julio Urias costs $97 in a better strikeout situation. I don't really see it. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think go to Urias and Marquez.
Yeah, and once again, Marquez, at least in single entry, everybody's going to be on the, not everybody, a lot of people are going to be on the Braves. They're going to be the most popular offense. I like the leverage that offers there. I know you said you like to play safe, but I like to play risky. You asked for my advice. That's where I like to go pitcher today is German Marquez. But now on the flip side of that game, let's get back into offenses, because those Coors Field offenses, obviously the Braves and the Rockies, they're both in, it's Coors Field. So relative to that, they're in a good spot. They're both offenses that have a high chance of being a top stack. A little bit negative leverage, but nothing crazy for a Coors Field game. I'm going to be underweight some field on them just based on my exposure to the pitchers. I'm not taking them out of my player pool entirely. I'm just going lighter on them than the field is. But how are you handling the Coors Field game today?
Yeah, so I'll end up under the field on them as well. I'll probably end up with more Braves just based on general quality, but I expect they'll both be pretty squashed down just through process. I tend to not want to get to this kind of a situation either, where I actually do believe in both pitchers on either side and you're just playing the ballpark. Like if this was a neutral field game, I wouldn't want any of the Rockies in my lineup. I don't think going up against Ian Anderson. They're a terrible ball team. And, neutral site with the same kind of ownership situation, right? And I think the Braves, for as good as they are, I wouldn't want to get overexposed to them with this kind of public ownership going up against someone as talented as German Marquez. So I don't want to just play the ballpark when everybody else is. I'll just play this ballpark on a day when nobody's going here. This is not that day, and they're going up against good pitchers. So I'll take some Braves. I'll take some of them as one-offs where I get them in my 4-3s. But overall, it's an undercut for me for sure.
By the way, you're getting some love in the YouTube chat right now. We've got Squatch Happens saying Digital is the man, pronounces names properly, not like Adam who destroys Spanish names. Which listen, look at Adam Scher. That is not a man of culture. What's the expectation of him to pronounce anything correct? That should never be the case when it's a Hispanic sounding name, which by the way, the names really roll off your tongue. That is definitely one of your better qualities when you're on cameras, your ability to pronounce names. And that's actually going to get me to a team that I'm going to ask you to pronounce some names for. I like the Houston Astros a whole bunch in this spot. And Joe Musgrove is really popular. We know how inconsistent Musgrove is. Is Musgrove going to be great today? Is going to be bad? I don't know, but I know one of those two versions of Musgrove is showing up. He's either scoring 30 fantasy points or like -5. Those are the only two versions of him that exist. Considering that he's popular, the Houston Astros are picking up 1% ownership. Some of the players in Houston, who by the way also have names that I'm sure YouTube chat will love to hear you pronounce. I like this spot for Houston as a low-owned leverage stack.
Absolutely. I think you and I have talked about them every single time they've been in this situation. I said it before, they're the best lineup in baseball in terms of not striking out, in terms of their ability to create runs. You've got some phenomenal hitters, some guys like Yulieski Gurriel, who get completely ignored and underowned. I have to change his name to Yuli Gurriel because that's how one of these things has it, and I've never bothered to correct it. That's how underappreciated he is. I appreciate him more than anybody in DFS, and even I haven't bothered to change his name in my model here. But for the season, 312 batting average with a 380 on base, 466 slugging percentage. His power is not really crazy. 13 home runs, a 154 ISO, but the guy runs 36% better than average in the middle of this lineup. He's always fairly priced, at least on FanDuel. He's 3,200 today, despite those numbers, and he's always underowned. He's always between like 1% and 5% ownership, despite being relatively fairly priced. You get a really good lineup here at decent pricing anyway, up and down. Jose Altuve up at the top, so you get Michael Brantley into Aledmys Diaz. There are good players, even when their apex stars aren't in the lineup. Brantley up at the top of the lineup becomes a phenomenal leadoff hitter. 316, 370, 447 on the season, creates runs 30% better than average. Everybody in today's confirmed lineup, except for Martin Maldonado at the bottom of the lineup, creates runs around 30% better than average. Maldonado, 30% worse than average, but he's a catcher, so we don't really need to worry about him. Put this lineup together in every possible combination that you can. They're fantastic. Yeah, you're going up against Joe Musgrove, but you're also going up against like half the field that's going to be on Joe Musgrove. So that's a really good leverage situation. Fire away with Astros, absolutely. Jordan Alvarez in the lineup as well today.
There we go. That's what the people wanted. Who's the shortstop for the Astros by chance?
Carlos Correa?
Yeah, the second baseman?
The second baseman today, Aledmys Diaz.
Okay, there we go. That's what the people want to hear. They want to hear those sweet sounds. We've got a super chat here from Arkafelza. That one is going to be less so one that's going to roll off the tongue. No tildes in Kyle Tucker. Arkafelza, super chat. Yelich or Will Smith for a home run call. So I know that you have your model where you rate out players in terms of their not necessarily percentages, but you give them a home run ranking. So who do you have higher in that, Christian Yelich or Will Smith?
In the heads up between those two guys, let's see. Will Smith is there. Yelich is that's Yelich with a bullet. Yelich about double the home run probability in my model and creeping up over the 10 mark. He's at an 11.62. So if you follow along in the home run column, a 10 is like an above average chance. So I've got him with a nice little chance here. He's had a bumpy year for Christian Yelich. He's up to 252, 373, 387, maybe coming around a little bit. 9% better than average creating runs, 8 home runs on the year. The 134 ISO, the 8 home runs are concerning, but the dude still makes hard contact 51.1% of the time, 8.7 barrel rate, 8.7% barrel rate. So yeah, I like the spot for Christian Yelich here, and definitely heads up against Will Smith. Better chance for Yelich to hit home run.
Yeah, and by the way, in our player props tool, Christian Yelich, 18% chance to hit a home run today, and Will Smith, 14% chance. So aligning with Terry right there in the data we have on the site, we also have Christian Yelich as the more likely of the two to go yard today. But let's open this back up to you. Any other offense that you want to talk about, or I'll lead you on. Why do you like the Dodgers? I don't think you've really gotten to talk about them in depth yet.
Yeah, so it's another spot where I just think we're getting them relatively underowned, and they're a loaded lineup, and they're not that expensive. They just project well. They do everything right. It's another team where just looking at the confirmed lineup, this is confirmed. Yeah, confirmed lineup. The entire team creates runs well above average. Let's do the average WRC plus for the 8 hitters in this lineup is 134. So the average is 34% better than the league average at creating runs. That's a pretty good baseball team. That's a team that you want to roster against a bullpen. Even if the Giants have a decent bullpen, they get an opener, Jay Jackson, 16 2/3 innings, 37.9% strikeout rate. That's phenomenal. He's going to be on the mound for an inning or two. You're going to get into the bullpen. These guys are going to get plenty of opportunities to get good contact on the ball, and they're an extremely, extremely productive lineup that you can string together in a lot of different ways. 3 guys with multi-position on FanDuel. You get Mookie with multi-position on DK, which is huge, moving in between second base and the outfield. That's, for a player with like Mookie Betts, that's a phenomenal asset to have, to be able to roster him at second base over there. On the FanDuel slate, Trey Turner, Max Muncy, and Chris Taylor, all multi-position eligibility at different spots too, so you can move them around and combine them in different ways. I just like the way the lineup comes together. And which with just how productive they are. Let's take a look at the hard hit rate. The top 6 hitters in the lineup average 45.2% hard hit rate. Top 6 hitters, average strikeout rate 18.1% on the season. They put the ball in play like crazy. They hit it hard. They hit it on the line. They hit home runs. There's nothing not to like about this Dodgers team, and they're low owned.
Yeah, I mean, we currently have them as the number 1 leverage stack on FanDuel. On DK, the number 1 leverage stack is currently the Houston Astros, but for sure, I think there's sensible reasons to get to both of them. The Dodgers earlier in the day, we're looking a little bit over-owned. That is not the case anymore. Their projected ownership share has gone down, while their projected top stack odds have gone up. So the Dodgers, to me, are a team that I am looking to get to today. The pricing is sometimes a little bit of a concern with the Dodgers. And it's not to say they're cheap today, but it's not like I'm dying to spend up for a whole bunch of pitchers today. It's not like I don't view not being able to get to Joe Musgrove or like Tyler Mahle in 80% of my lineups to be like a massive opportunity cost. I'm fine with playing some of these low-owned cheap pitchers that are kind of a dice roll. So to me, I don't find for this particular slate the opportunity cost to be that excessive with the Dodgers. Now, I want to ask you about one other team here because they're picking up a whole bunch of ownership, and that is the Los Angeles Angels, who, at least on DK, they do have great.
I lost you there for a second. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I just don't know what we're talking about.
Okay, there we go. We're talking about the Los Angeles Angels. It's like that old that old T-Mobile commercial? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Was that? I don't know if that was the phone service, but that aside, the Los Angeles Angels right now, they have a 5.7% chance of being the top scoring team of the day on DraftKings, but a 9.7% ownership share. That has them being massively negatively leveraged over on DK. Over on FanDuel, also going over on, not quite to the same extent, 8.6% chance to be a top stack, a 6.2% chance to be a top stack compared to 8.6% ownership share. So negatively leveraged on both slates, both on the slate for both sites. To me, with the Angels, I get the spot. I understand why people are getting to them. Too much ownership for me. I'm looking to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a team. It's a kind of a weird lineup. Going Fletcher, Ohtani, Gosselin, Jack Mayfield into Justin Upton, Joe Adell, Kurt Suzuki, Juan Lagares, Luis Rengifo at the bottom of the lineup. There's not much talent through the back 3 hitters at least. I believe in Joe Adell, even though he's not shown anything at all at the major league level yet. So throw him into that bucket. A 5-man lineup with Jack Mayfield hitting cleanup, Phil Gosselin hitting third. It's kind of ugly. And then David Fletcher up top, I believe in the hit tool, the on-base skills, but he's not a guy who does much of anything on his own. He's a correlation play. You're talking about a lineup with Shohei Ohtani and Justin Upton in it and not all that much else. Ohtani getting over-owned, Upton getting over-owned. Yeah, I don't need this spot. Even going up against Colby Allard, I agree they could have a nice game here against Allard. 19.2% strikeout rate on the season, a 4.64 xFIP. Puts too many guys on base with a 1-2-3 whip. Gives up hard contact, 10.7% barrel rate. 37.8% hard hit is okay, but too many barrel balls and just creates opportunities for run creation, sequential hitting, and scoring. I just don't want to go to this lineup when everybody else is on the Angels side of things. I don't believe in most of these hitters all that much. So, yeah, this is a pass spot for me.
By the way, the latest tweets that were posted in our Slack chat by the news guy himself, Negro Loco, we had from a beat reporter, Chris McCoskey. He said that Matt Boyd is going to warm up, and it looks like they're going to be starting the game on time in Cincinnati. So, by the way, we've got YouTube chat has gone totally off the rails. They're pointing out all their favorite Hispanic models right now. But look at what your ability to pronounce names where that's gotten us to, Terry.
You're welcome, everyone.
Which, by the way, yesterday we had some bot that was spamming the YouTube chat with like porn links, and luckily we've gotten rid of that. But who has not made an appearance today is we had Nightbot, who was posting all kinds of stuff in the YouTube chat. He's not been as active today, but I'm gonna give out the information that I know that Nightbot would want us to share, and that is that if you are into college football DFS, or even if you're not into college football DFS yet, but you're looking to get into it, head on over to Awesemo.com. Use the promo code TAILGATE. That'll get you $10 off your first week of Awesemo Plus college football. That includes player projections, ownership projections, matchup data, and much more. So head on over to Awesemo.com if you're looking to play college football, which, by the way, I don't know anything about college football, but Matt Kajeski does a great job with projections, and I had some slates last year that were really profitable because of the projections on the site, something I would not be able to do by myself. So promo code TAILGATE, that'll get you $10 off your first week of Awesemo Plus college football. So we've got a few minutes left here, and any other stacks here that you really want to bring up or talk about? If not, we could do some home run picks.
What have we not gone through? Just looking at the board, a team that I hadn't really considered all that much, and I'll have to jump back over to my model here as I'm talking it through because I was in my lineup sorting thing here. But let's pull these guys up because I wasn't really considering them, but the Mariners look at least a little bit positively leveraged, reasonably well ranked, going up against Humberto Castellanos. You're welcome, chat. I think it's a reasonable spot for them. 15.1% strikeout rate over 21 innings for Castellanos. Nothing really to worry about here with him. 10.5% walks. It's a very small sample, but they're profiling out fairly well. There's ownership on them, but there's not major ownership outside of Mitch Haniger and Kyle Seager. Everybody else in the lineup and some reasonable talented hitters, Ty France, Abraham Toro, 5-ish% ownership on the DK slate. Everybody's favorite Jose Marmolejos, who has those weird games for low cost, 4 home runs and 103 plate appearances. If you want to go to him, he's in the lineup today. But I think the middle of this lineup is at least rosterable in some combinations. Not anybody to go crazy for, but they're at least popping up to like the middle of the board here. Some productive hitters, 30 home runs out of Haniger, 31 home runs out of Seager on the season. Ty France, nice little 291, 362, 452. Creates runs 29% better than average. Toro's been very good since going to Seattle, 257. 336, 414, creates runs 12% better than average, 10 home runs, 4 steals on the season. Jared Kelenic, if you wanted to go crazy and roster the upside of the prospect who went pops earlier in the season, he's very cheap and he's hitting 6 in that lineup. So I think there's some playable spots there. It wasn't one I was thinking about before right now, but they're at least on the board a little.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, once again, I think the ownership at offense is fairly efficient today. This isn't really where I'm going off the board or really crazy. I mean, to me, I'm playing so contrarian a pitcher today. I'm getting to 1% owned guys, and Ian Anderson and Herman Marquez. So, that's something that's really going to differentiate for me. Now, I'm going to ask you, with some of that news that we've gotten on the Reds game, how are you approaching the offenses and the pitching there?
I went with the one that I put into the filter is the one that had that game included. So right now I'm riding with some Red shares and some Tyler Mahle shares. If I have any Matt Boyd, I'm hoping he doesn't make it through my sorting process. Pretty similar with the Tigers offense. So it's all about the Red side, but that one is in the process for me today, right now. What about you?
So with the, I was going to say it's funny, right? Because with the weather outlook looking better, Tyler Mahle's now become massively popular again. So we now have on DK, Tyler Mahle's projected for 51% ownership, over on FanDuel's projected for 35% ownership. Given those kind of ownership data, I think he's reasonable to get to, but I just don't want anywhere near the amount that the field has on him. So there's still other pitchers I prefer for GPPs. Clearly, it's a great spot for Mahle, but would you be comfortable playing him in cash games as well?
Yeah, I think for cash, as long as that weather holds, I think he's certainly got the most upside on the board. And I think the price is at least appropriate in terms of point per dollar as he mixes in with the others. The only real risk you're taking on in cash is the game getting rained out, which is the same risk that we're all, kind of dealing with that game. I agree with you that, it kind of sucks that the ownership is going back to him, but that's where now I'm just going to rely on my normal process. Will hopefully come out to a reasonable amount of them in comparison to where the field is. But I do want to go with the lineups that do have that game in.
Yeah, and it's funny how some of the ownership shakes out. Where we spend all this time debating, Tyler Mahle, what do we want to do with him in tournaments, and then he just ultimately ends up being so overowned that it's like, hey, people are good with the weather now, and now I just want to get less of him because he's become so popular. Right. So it's almost like a lot of ado about nothing for me anyway in terms of the weather because of how this is now going with Mahle becoming massively popular again. But let's get into some home run picks before we wrap up the show here, Terry. And I know that people always like your motto when you go out and do your home run picks. Also, people, you're missing out if you're not reading the articles that Terry does over on the site for us. They're free to read, and Terry goes into a lot of detail going over all his favorite tournament options. So for sure, stuff you want to be checking out every day. But Terry, who is your home run pick of the day?
Thank you, pal. So I went with the team that's profiling very well for me in the home run model as well. I talked about them at length in this conversation, talked about them at length in the column. That's those Kansas City Royals. For whatever reason, I can't get away from them against Ronaldo here. So I went with the obvious guy from within the Royals and just took Sal Perez. Ridiculous amount of home runs, 38 home runs on the season. By far the best offensive catcher in baseball. Plays every day, too. 547 plate appearances, 55.1% hard hit rate, 15.5% barreled ball rate. I'll take Sal to hit a home run off of anybody. He can definitely do it here off Ronaldo.
I dig it. He's definitely, at least in terms of DraftKings, is expensive, so it makes it a little bit hard to get him into stacks. But obviously, if you have the salary to spend, there's no catcher that's ever more worth that salary than Salvador Perez, at least not this year, given the power upside he's shown. Now, I like my home run pick here for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's my pick, right? I'm not going to make a pick I don't like. But that aside, my most rostered hitter today also pops up as the number one home run prop bet in our betting model today. That is Eloy Jimenez. I'm overweight to the field on him. I love him in White Sox stacks. I love him as a one-off. And in our home run player prop tool, we have him with a 22% chance to homer today at plus 425 odds. That gives him a 14% expected ROI on that plus 425 bet. So what do you make of Eloy tonight?
I love that pick. Eloy is my home run pick. So in that article, I make my main pick, which was Sal that I just gave, but then I give one for every team that's on the main slate. And Eloy was my pick from the White Sox for this slate. Love the spot for him. Just love getting to him anytime I can. He's a tremendous home run hitter, tremendous hitter in general. So I like that pick a lot. And I think the White Sox are an underappreciated asset today. So I think I'll definitely be trying to force in some White Sox as we do these last couple of minutes.
All right. We do have a question in our premium Slack chat from Blackbird15. He's saying, who is the top overall FanDuel cash pitcher on the slate? Considering the ownership going to Tyler Mahle right now, the answer, I think, is him. The weather does not appear to be a massive concern right now. He's projected for 35% ownership as long as, the game's about to start. But given the information we have now and the ownership going towards him, it's Tyler Mahle for me on FanDuel for cash. What say you, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one that makes sense. Biggest upside spot, biggest point per dollar spot. Follow the field. Just play him comfortably at this point. If we get rained on, we get rained on. Sometimes we have to take those risks and embrace it. That's kind of what we do.
All right. Now, let's see if there's any other questions we have in the chat that I could address. If not, okay, it doesn't look like it. So here's how we're going to close out the show, Terry.
All right.
Which team, pitcher, stack, whatever you want your answer to be, what is most likely to make or break your night?
I just took the Padres from the top team in my filter here to the bottom team in the filter here. So that I'm going to try and correct it a little bit, but taking a lot of Padres out of my life here. I don't like attacking ground ball specialists. So I think that's an interesting spot. Good team, good upside team, but I'm going to go under the field on them pretty aggressively and push up some of these other teams that we've talked about. I'm going to force the Dodgers up a little bit right now here. So I think a little bit of that, and then whether or not the pitching at Coors Field comes through for us or not, I think is going to be a big inflection point for both of us probably, because I'm going to be overweight on Herman Marquez here too.
Yeah, it is absolutely Coors Field for me today. When I have a bunch of exposure to, not only that I have a bunch of exposure to Herman Marquez and Ian Anderson, but I'm also coming in underweight to the field on stacks of that game. And if the Rockies and the Braves, if each of them go out and score, if it's like a 9-8 game, I'm most likely getting my ass kicked today. And there's a fairly good chance that happens because it's Coors Field. So I hope that isn't the case, but also it's Coors Field. Can't ever not expect that to be a possibility. But that is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you to Jock Market for sponsoring the show, and to everybody at home, good luck today.